Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'd like to introduce to you my manager. This is Tim Rodriguez. He's the risk manager for UDOT and has been with UDOT for the past, over 6 years. Tim has been in the insurance business for over 18 years. I personally have known him for at least 15 of those. And so I'm pleased to introduce to you Tim Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for showing up, the few of you who did. There we go. We're just starting, Dottie. Okay, we're going to go through the risk assessment checklist. I don't have any slides, sorry. The risk assessment checklist is available online at the UDOT website. Go through and type risk assessment checklist, and you'll get the latest one. What we want to use is the one dated September of 2014. That's the only one we want to use. So if you're using any other ones, get rid of them. Go to the one dated September of 2014. The first thing when we receive these, our goal is the turnaround time of 24 hours. We know it's important for you guys to go through, and turn around, and sometimes the advertising is to go through and you guys want to get these out on the street as quickly as possible, so that's why we will try to have these back to you within 24 hours. Sometimes I can have them back to you quicker than that, but our goal is 24 hours. If we don't have it back to you within 24 hours, send us an email, follow-up email, and we'll look into it. Okay, when we do receive these, the first thing we look at is the engineering estimate. That goes through, and that should be the value of the project, how much you think that project is worth. If that project is worth $75 million or more, it will be under the OSIP, covered under the Owner-Controlled Insurance Program. If it's less than $75 million, then we're going to be going through and we're going to be looking at all the questions. If it's over, it will be, like I say, it will be under the OSIP. So question number one, will hauling or heavy equipment be expected to access the project from non-state routes? The reason we're asking that is what will a heavy equipment do to a non-state route that's not designed to go through and carry heavy equipment? That road will get smashed, obviously, and damaged. And who will they turn to when they realize that that municipality will go through and come to UDOT and say, you owe us for this road? We'll go to the contractor and say, take care of this. So that's why we want to go through and know if there's the contractor, if there's going to be going through and any heavy equipment going on these non-state routes. The second question, will there be any school zones or school traffic within the project limits? Let me tell you a little story. When I was growing up, they were building a school behind my house, and our kids in the neighborhood would go through, and hate to admit it, we were not the best of kids. We go through and grab the survey sticks, those stakes they'd gone through and put in the ground during the weekend when the construction people weren't around, and we'd take them out and go through and play nights and go through and beat each other with those sticks, things you weren't supposed to do. Okay, well, kids get easily entertained with these type of things. Okay, back in those days, our parents would go through and beat the tar out of us if they'd go through and realize what we were doing. Nowadays, parents would go through and sue the contractor because it's an attractive nuisance. Okay, so that's why we need to know, is there potential for an attractive nuisance claim? So that's why we're asking this. Is there a school zone there? Is there going to be kids around? Next question. Will there be restricted, closed sidewalks or trails? Okay. Is there going to be a change? Are we going to be putting people on the opposite side of the street? We're going to have to go through, is there a chance that we not properly mark that sidewalk's closed? How many times have you gone through and seen where they've gone through and they're supposed to have closed the sidewalk and they haven't closed it properly? Okay, so we need to know, is there a chance that they're not going to go through and do that properly? So will there be restricted closed sidewalks? Are there any major intersections within the project limits? Now, number one, the reason we're asking this is because you're going to go through and you're going to have a lot of bumper-to-bumper traffic. It's going to cause a lot of heated drivers. You're going to see a lot of fender benders. Number two, you might see cars moving to side streets. You might see trucks moving to side streets. In today's litigious society, these trucks moving to side streets might cause accidents, and we might be brought in just because they can. Okay, so that's why we're asking, is there any major intersections? Will detours be required for traffic controls? The next question. Okay, have you ever gone through and been driving and then just get caught up in your own thoughts and then realize you've been driving for about 20 minutes and you just haven't thought about? Never. Never. Well, just throw that detour right in there. Okay, people forget what's happening. They don't pay attention sometimes when they're driving. They're texting society. Remember, we've discussed those type of things. Okay, we need to know, is there potential for an accident with the detours? That's why we're asking about the detours. Will the use of movable concrete barrier be allowed for traffic control? Why do you think we're asking about that? I mean, that's positive protection. That's protecting lives, right? Protecting the workers. The reason we're asking that is because what happens when that car goes through and hits that positive protection? It bounces off and goes back into traffic. And then goes through and probably hits another car. Well, they're going to go through and they're going to come back against the contractor for going through and putting a barrier in their way. So that's the reason we're asking that question.
So is that like zipper barrier or like precast barrier?
Precast barrier.
All right. I figured it was more informal, but there's not very many.
Yeah, it's precast barrier.
So precast barrier.
Precast barrier.
Why not zipper barrier? Serve the same purpose.
Yeah, because with the zipper barrier,
Then zipper barrier as well. I'd have no problem putting zipper barriers there as well.
so really,
Any concrete barrier.
Concrete barrier, not cast in place or anything like that, but concrete barrier actually is just meant to deflect anyway. So if you're using it as positive protection, it's not going to be bolted down to the ground.
right.
So there is potential for them to go through it, but like Tim says, what we've found is typically if we're forcing people back out into the roadway, they want to sue us for that. And that's one of the things I told Cheryl, which would you prefer to do, come back out into traffic, or do you want to hit somebody? So where do you weigh that out? Either way, they're going to come, they typically come after us for it.
So I think the word that I get hung up is movable barrier, because movable barrier to me is zipper barrier. I think that's where I'm,
Any precast is movable, do they come in and place?
They do. They come in and they do go through and, yeah, it's,
right, well, I guess, because, well, I'm a project manager now, but I've been a designer for a while, so I, for a long time, thought, what exactly does this mean? So I'm just coming from that perspective of barrier. I mean, do you mean anything that can be, let's see,
anything that can be moved.
yeah, anything that is not permanently affixed?
Correct. Not like cable barrier that's been set in place. And by the way, this is informal, so if you've got any questions, just fire away, or if you've got, this is open discussion. So, with there being so many of us, let's not all talk at once, okay? Okay. Do you anticipate flaggers being needed for traffic control? You get the human factors there. Number one, you could go through and have the flaggers. How many times have we seen flaggers not truly being in control? Not truly properly trained. Or yes, there we go. We'll say properly trained. Or if they are, they're not covering all the roadways, or they might be going through and one person trying to cover both ends, as Dave and I saw at one location. So we need to know there's a human element there. That's why we're asking about flaggers. Do you anticipate emergency shoulders and or pullouts? Now, when are we going to see emergency shoulders or pullouts? On I-15, right? Or I-80 or I-70, right? And what's the speed limit? How slow will we get it down to? Maybe I heard this morning we might be able to get it down to 45 miles an hour. Okay, you got to go through and get it out of that small little zone and get it back in traffic going 45 miles an hour. So do you see a problem there?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a 70-mile-an-hour zone, isn't it designed to 70, even though you dropped it to 45?
Well, it's designed to 70, but
So you have a better chance if it's designed in that way, but still, trying to get out there is...
that's why we're asking that question. Okay. Will there be a high potential for property damage due to loose materials or overspray? I think that's pretty self-obvious as to why we're asking that question. Chip seal jobs. Will there be any work required above live traffic, such as falling debris from slopes, bridge work, crane work, etc.? You guys saw all that. Did you see that that piece of that bridge that came off of I-80 onto that taxi? Google it on KSL's website. I think they might still have the pictures. It was a shuttle bus or shuttle van that fell. Piece of the bridge off 13th East fell onto a shuttle van, just literally smashed the heck out of this van. Luckily, no one was hurt. But
How about traffic signals? Like setting traffic signal poles or putting the arms and...
that could be what you could see falling debris from that. Now, the next one is an interesting one. Will the project use accelerated bridge construction? The reason we're asking about that is because we're going to be going through and using a different type of insurance on this. We're going to be using a policy called the Builder's Risk Policy. And the Builder's Risk Policy will go through and cover the bridge from when we get the materials up until when the bridge is in place. So that's why we want to go through and we need to know if we're going to be using the accelerated bridge construction. Because we want to protect that if there's any damage to that bridge during any of that time, that bridge is built and in place, finally in place. It'll cover that moving of that bridge. So if there's any damage that occurs during that time, we've got protection. So that's why we asked that question. Yes. Will there be any night work? Obviously, like I got a phone call from a lady who went through and hit a tire at night because she didn't see it till she was too late, because she was out running her headlights. How many times do we get phone calls of people doing that or hitting deers because they're out running their headlights? Okay, so of course it's UDOT's fault. You know, we should take care of those tires, but, you know, still. So that's why we ask about night work. Will explosive materials be used? Commercial general liability policies specifically exclude blasting materials. So what we need to do in this case, if you mark that box yes, you'll get a response back from Cheryl or I saying to go through and get that coverage reinstated on the policy. They can go through and that insurance company will go through and reinstate that coverage. They can do that. And so that's what the response will be. If we go through, if they're going to be using blasting coverage, if they're going to be using blasting, we want that coverage back. Will there be a high potential of environmental impacts due to proper project materials? Okay, if that's the case, if you mark yes on that, we want pollution liability insurance. So box 14, if you go through and mark yes there, we'll go through and we'll tell you that you'll want pollution liability, and we'll tell you what limits we want on that. It'll be based on percentage of the engineer estimate. And we get further, when we get down the bottom, when we get down towards the bottom, I'll tell you how we come to the totals. Will pre-construction surveys be done to analyze impacts to third-party homes or businesses, including effects from vibratory compaction? Okay, we want to know, are you guys going to be going through and doing surveys before you go through and do the construction? This goes through and helps us to go through and determine how much insurance coverage is needed. That's just what this helps us with. Yes, it's a good thing. Will there be work near a railroad right-of-way? Now, if it's a live UTA line, the answer is going to be yes. If it's UTA property where it's not a live line, and the answer is going to be no. If it's any other railway, the answer is yes. Correct. Union Pacific requires it of all their lines. UTA does not of non-live live lines. It's their vision to go through and build throughout the state. And they've bought a lot of property, but they don't care about it being protected down in certain areas, and I'm not sure exactly where, but I know they've got some property down south that it's okay if we don't insure it. I've spoken with their risk manager. Just make sure, verify it's UTA property, not UP. And the limits, the 2 million, 6 million, it will always be 2 million, 6 million, is set in stone by Union Pacific. I've tried negotiating, I've tried everything with Union Pacific, but there's no way they will change their mind. They've told me it's 2 million, 6 million, no questions asked. So, well, if you mark yes on that box, expect railroad protection at 2 million, 6 million. Will there be any significant utility impacts? Okay, what happens if we hit a gas line? How expensive can that be? Shutting down a neighborhood with a gas line, or businesses, business community with a gas line. Okay, we need to know. Will there be any negative impacts to protected lands, waterways, water rights, or hydrology? Again, pollution liability will come into play here if you mark yes. Will there be any local government, colleges, or universities, political entity, etc., impacted by this project? Let me tell you a little story. When I started at UDOT, my predecessor insured a project. We weren't involved in it in any way besides insuring it. Something went wrong with one of the sound walls. The mayor of this community went through and called up his congressman because they could not get this sound wall fixed. The congressman called up Carlos. Carlos called up me and called up the region director and said, solve this problem. Now, we weren't the contractor. We weren't any way involved in building the sound wall. We were just the insurance company. Okay, that's why we ask this question. Could this be a political nightmare? Okay, that's why this is a yes or no question. The last question, will this be a design build or construction manager general contractor project employing an outside firm? If yes, the approximate structure value. Okay? The reason we ask this is because if you mark yes, we're going to require professional liability for the contractor on this. Now, based on your answers, now we reserve the right to make some changes here, but generally, if 15 or more of the boxes are marked yes, that engineer estimate will go through and we'll set the insurance limits, the general liability limits at 75% of the estimate value. But most of the projects we deal with are about 1, 2, 3 million. So 75% is about maybe 1 or 2 million. So we typically stay at the standard specs. If 10 or more of the boxes are checked off, we'll go with 50%. If 5 or more of the boxes are checked, we'll go with 25%. Now, we do reserve the right to go through and make changes. For example, this morning, I received one which only had 4 of the boxes checked, but that project value was $54 million. I was not going to leave the values at 1 million, 2 million. So I acted like there were 5 boxes checked and put it at 25%.
What if as the project goes on, more of those boxes should have been checked?
We've already set the insurance by contract, so there's nothing we can do. Because it goes out to bid with what we've gone with. Any other questions?
How about on 20?
Yep.
Design build, CMGC one,
Yep.
outside the firm, yes. I've got a CMGC project that we don't have any bridges or
Sound walls?
yeah, some walls or overhead signs or culverts in it. It's just roadway.
What's the value of it? We just go with just the regular value then.
Oh, okay, so just the overall dollar value?
We just go with the engineer estimate. We just go with the engineer estimate.
So then I just leave that part
what you value that project, what's the construction value of that project?
Construction value, okay.
Yep.
Because in my engineer's estimate, I have bid items, and then I have a whole bunch of non-bid items that adds up to the entire commission-approved amount. And that's what I,
Could the whole, just the construction cost,
it makes sense,
just the construction cost.
because why, he wouldn't be insuring the cost for the
Right,
PE.
correct.
I guess maybe I would make a recommendation to say construction value or bid items.
Why don't you send that to me in an email? Because this is a working document, a living document. I don't mind changing it.
And again, it's just, I'm one person who has input, so you don't need to.
You are the only one who showed up that's an engineer that works with this document. The other two are safety people who wanted to learn here what you guys did with the document. So if you sat through me talking about it, you, by all means, you your voice should be heard. And that's been caught on tape now. I'm in deep trouble. Dottie, do you have any questions?
I just know I'll never have to fill that out.
Question
I'm gonna give it to Jessica.
about blasting. So say we're putting this together and we don't anticipate blasting.
Okay.
Now, contract rolls out, contractor shows up, they want to change some things, they want to blast. I understand we have a blasting spec, and that requires them to have the insurance.
If they go with the blasting spec and it requires the insurance, then they have to go through and get the insurance. As long,
I don't think it talks about insurance, it talks about everything else.
then
I don't think the RA would be thinking, oh, by the way, we should be getting more insurance.
We had that happen where we didn't anticipate blasting and then they showed up and we changed.
then have someone get hold of me and I will go through and, because you safety people would find out before I would. They don't come to me.
So Tim, if we came to you and said, hey, they're blasting and it's not on their insurance, would we come to you and say, hey, they're doing this, what do we do?
And I'd go through and see what we could do. I'd go down to our attorneys and see what we can do about it. Ben, you've basically missed the talk. Any other questions? We just had one thing we're going to change on the form. So rather than engineer estimate, we're going to go with bid item.
For the value?
Yeah.
But really, what Tim is wanting to capture is the bid items.
Yeah,
At least it sounds like.
and that's what the coverages are counts off of then with your percentages.
Yep.
I mean, I know the addition at the bottom, you know, my world is the design build type stuff, and we always get a bunch of those questions on professional liability. And so I think at the bottom there, where we now got, where we're able to separate out the value of stuff like structures, and, you know, specific items, what does it say? Walls, structures.
Bridges, walls, overhead signs, culverts, etc.
And I guess what that, my understanding is what that's trying to do is to capture stuff that have design related, a higher level of design related risk to them, and put that professional liability coverage appropriate for that.
Yep.
design.
Right. All right. Well, thank you all for your time this afternoon.